Hello there friends, it's Ashley here from the Loopy Lamb and theloopylamb.com, and thanks so much for stopping by the channel. It is week 16 of the 2023 Amigurumi Advent Calendar Crochet Along, and this week I have a really fun pattern for us. We're going to be making our dolls these cute little tote bags. Now these tote bags are made in one piece to minimize any sort of sewing, and my favorite part is that they are functional. Your kids can put things inside the bag for their little dolls to carry for them. So let's hop on into finding out what we need to follow along with today's tutorial. To follow along with today's tutorial to make your tote bag for your crochet doll, you're going to need the following materials. You're going to need a worsted weight yarn in your color of preference. I'm using Bravo worsted weight yarn in the color denim today, a 3.5mm or E crochet hook, a pair of scissors, a tapestry needle, sewing needle and thread in a coordinating color that matches your yarn, 2 9mm buttons, and 4 stitch markers. So let me clear my workspace here and we'll hop on in to crocheting our crochet doll tote bag. To start our tote bag, we're going to need to create a chain of 12. To start our chain, we need to create a slip knot. So I'm holding the tail end of my yarn across my palm, and then I'm just going to wrap it around my fingers around the back, bringing it around the front and crossing it over itself to create an X. Then I'm going to flip my hand over, bringing the yarn across the top of my hand. Then I'm just going to pin it in place with my ring finger between my middle finger and my ring finger. Now this next step you can do with a crochet hook or just your fingers. I prefer to use my crochet hook here. And I'm going to go insert my hook under the first strand and over the second. I'm going to pull that second strand under the first strand, and then I'm just going to keep pulling until all of the yarn comes off my fingers and transfers onto the hook. Then I'm going to pull both of my yarn tails to tighten up my knot, and then I'm going to pull the working yarn, the yarn that's attached to the ball, and pull it so the slip knot is tight up against my hook, but still has some freedom of movement there. And now I'm ready to create my chain of 12. To do that, I'm going to hold my hook and yarn in my hands like so, and I'm going to yarn over hook and pull the yarn through the loop on my hook. That's my first chain. I'm going to yarn over again and pull that yarn through the loop on my hook. That's my second chain. I'm going to continue to do this yarn over and pull the yarn through the loop until I have 12 chains. So if you'd like to pause your video and do 12 chains, I'll be back in just a moment. So I'm back and I have my 12 chains. If you need to double check the count of your chains, you can turn your chain so the V's are facing you, and counting from your slip knot, you're going to count over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. You're going to count all of those V's. You should have 12 V's, and we never count the yarn on our hook as a chain. All right, so now that we have our chain of 12, we're ready to start the round 1 instructions for our doll's tote bag. So the instructions say we're going to work a single crochet increase into the second chain from the hook. So we never count the yarn on our hook as a chain, so that means we're going to start counting our chains from this first chain here. So counting over 1 and 2, I'm going to place my finger right next to that second chain here, so that way I know that's where I'm inserting my hook for my next step. So inserting my hook into that second chain there, I'm going to yarn over and pull up a loop. There should be 2 loops on your hook. Then I'm going to yarn over and pull through both loops. And that completes my first single crochet. Then I'm going to insert back into that same chain, yarn over and pull up a loop again. You have 2 loops on your hook, and then we're going to yarn over and pull through both of those loops. And that's our single crochet increase. Anytime you see a single crochet increase in a pattern, it means that there are 2 single crochets worked into the same stitch. So our next instructions here are we're going to work 1 single crochet into each of the next 9 chains. So working directly into that next empty chain there, we're going to insert our hook, yarn over and pull up a loop. There's 2 loops on your hook, yarn over and pull through both loops. And that's your first single crochet completed. And we're going to continue to work these 1 single crochet into the next 8 chains. And now we have one chain left to work into. And into this chain, we're going to work 3 single crochets. So inserting into that chain, we're single crocheting once. We're going to go back into that chain, move my tail out of the way there, single crochet a second time, and then back into that same chain, we're going to single crochet a third time. Now you might notice that while I'm working those chains, it's kind of turning our piece, and I'm holding that tail out from when we created our chain just out of the way here. And I'll probably work over mine. You don't have to, but I like to work over it in the little tote bag pattern because it's easier to get to, easier than trying to get to it later to weave it in. So now we're going to be working onto the other side of our chain to finish the base of our tote bag. And to start there, we're going to skip the chain we just worked into our 3 stitches, and we're starting into this next chain here. And now these are the back loops of the chains that we worked into initially. So working into that loop there, we're going to work 1 single crochet. And then we're going to work 1 single crochet into each of the remaining chains. At the end of this round, we should have 24 single crochet stitches. So I've done my 10 single crochets, and this is what your piece should look like at this point. This is the base of the bag, and at this point you should have those 24 single crochets. And if you need to count your stitches, you would just look at the V's at the top of the stitches and count those V's around your piece. Now, when we're moving into round 2, you're going to need a stitch marker. So I'm going to grab one here and bring it over because we need to keep track of the first stitch of every round. And as we're going into round 2, we're going to be doing our first stitch here. So working into the first stitch, we're going to place 1 single crochet. And now that I've completed that first stitch, I'm going to place a stitch marker into that stitch to keep track of the first stitch of the round. Now we're going to work 3 single crochets into the next stitch. Now we will work 1 single crochet into each of the next 9 stitches. There's 4. 6. So now that we have our 9 single crochets completed, we're going to work 3 single crochets into the next stitch. So into that stitch here, we're going to single crochet once, back into the same stitch, we're going to single crochet twice, and then back into the same stitch, we're going to do it a third time. Now we're going to work 1 single crochet into the next stitch. And 3 single crochets into the next. So there's 1, back into the same stitch, there's 2, and then back into the same stitch, there's 3. Now we're going to work 1 single crochet into each of the next 9 stitches. There's 1, 3, and 6, So now that I have my 9 single crochets completed, I have 1 stitch left to be worked in this round, and I'm going to work 3 single crochets into that stitch. So into the stitch, there's 1 single crochet, back into the same stitch, there's your 2nd single crochet, and back into the same stitch, there is our 3rd single crochet. And by working those 3 single crochets, we've created little corners, so that way our bag is rectangular and not an oval shape. You should have 32 stitches at the end of round 2. So moving into round 3, this is a simple row. We're going to work 1 single crochet into each stitch around. The only difference we're going to do than just normal stitches is we're going to work our stitches into the back loops only. So turn your work so you can see the tops of the stitches with the V's facing you, and you can see that each V is comprised of 2 different strands. There's one that's furthest from you and one that's closest to you. The one that's closest to you is called the front loop, and the one that's furthest from you is called the back loop. So I've removed my stitch marker, and I'm going to insert my hook into the top of the stitch to pick up that back loop. All right, and I'll show you that again. Inserting from the top of the stitch through the center of the V and out through the back to pick up only that back loop. Then I'm going to yarn over and pull up the loop, and then finish my single crochet. And then I'm going to take my stitch marker and place that back into that first stitch. And I'm ready to keep going. So again, we're working 1 single crochet into each stitch around, working through the back loops only. So again, into that next stitch, we're going to insert our hook through the top of this stitch to pick up that back loop only, and then single crochet as normal. And I'll show you this one more time. Into that next stitch through the top to pick up that back loop only, and then single crochet as normal. So if you'd like to pause your video and work 1 single crochet into in the back loop of each stitch around, I'll meet you back at the end of the round to show you how we're moving into round 4. So we have just finished the last stitch of round 3, and you can see we've got that loop here that's remaining from the previous round, and that is going to help us turn our bag upwards so we can start creating the size of our bag. And that little loop will kind of act as a little bit of a trim on the bottom of the bag. So for rounds 4 through 11, they're all worked the same way. We're going to work 1 single crochet into each stitch around. So I'll move my stitch marker out of the way, and then we're just going to single crochet under both loops as normal for each stitch around. There should be no changes in your stitch count. We're still going to have 32 stitches in every round. And make sure that you're moving up your stitch marker every round to keep track of that first stitch. So if you'd like to pause your video and work 1 single crochet into each stitch around for rounds 4 through 11, I'll meet you back here at the end of round 11 to show you how we're going to start creating the flap for our bag. All right, so I just finished my last stitch of round 11, and we're going to start building our closure flap for our bag. But before we do that, I want to set us up for when we're going to do our strap, which we're going to attach onto the bag so there's no sewing. But we need to mark some stitches so we know where they are for later. So my yellow stitch marker here is in stitch 1 of round 11, but I'm not going to need that to mark that stitch moving forward. But I do need to place a stitch marker in stitch 2 of this round. So I'm just going to take that stitch marker out, and I'm going to place it in the 2nd stitch of round 11. Then I'm going to take another stitch marker, and I'm going to place that marker into stitch 3 of round 11. Now, because we're going to need to attach our strap to the other side of the bag, we're going to need to place stitch markers in stitches 18 and 19. So counting over from my red stitch marker here, I'm going to find stitch 18. So we know this is stitch 2. So we're going to go 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. So I'm going to place my finger there, grab a stitch marker, and place a stitch marker in stitch 18, and another stitch marker in stitch 19. And this is what your bag should look like with your stitch markers. And we're ready to start round 12, or row 12, I should say, because we're going to be creating our closure flap now. Now the closure flap is worked back and forth and turned rows, so you'll notice that I'm saying row instead of rounds now. So to start with row 12, we're going to yarn over and pull up a loop to chain 1. Then we're going to turn our work. Now we're going to work 1 single crochet into the first 12 stitches. So working into that last stitch we created in row 11, we're going to single crochet. And then we're going to just work 1 single crochet into each of the next 11 stitches so that we have a total of 12 single crochets. There's 3. And 6. There's 9. And 12. So now that I have my 12 single crochets done, I'm not going to work into any of the other stitches in row 11 for the rest of the bag. We're going to leave the rest of these stitches unworked. And we're going to start building our closure flap a little bit more. So we're going to chain up 1 and turn our work. So for rows 13 through 20, they're all worked the same way. We're going to do that chain up 1 and turn our work, and then we're just going to work 1 single crochet into each of these stitches. And we're only working into those 12 stitches that we worked into, or that we created in row 12, because we want our flap to be only 12 stitches wide. So if you'd like to pause your video and work 1 single crochet into each stitch across for rows 13 through 20. I'll meet you back here at the end of row 20 to show you how we're moving into row 21. So I just finished my last stitch of round 20 and we're ready to move into row 21. And in row 21, we're going to create some chain spaces that will become our buttonholes so the bag can be secure closed. So we're going to yarn over and chain up 1 and turn our work. The right side of the bag should be facing you at this point, and just in case you didn't count your rows in your flap here. So we're going to work 1 single crochet into each of the first 3 stitches. There's 1. And there's 3. So now that we have our 3 single crochets, we're going to create our first chain space for our button. So we're going to yarn over and chain 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Then we're going to skip 6 stitches and slip stitch into the 7th chain. So, sorry, I should have said chains instead of stitches. I don't know why I said stitches. So we're going to skip the 6 chains and we're going to work into the 7th chain. So again, we never count the loop on our hook as a chain. We're going to count here. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then into the 7th chain here, we're going to do a slip stitch. So insert into that chain, yarn over and pull up a loop. You should have 2 loops on your hook. Then you're going to pull that loop that you just pulled up and pull that through the loop that was already on your hook to finish your slip stitch. Now we're going to single crochet into the next 6 stitches of this row 20 here. So working into this stitch here, we're going to single crochet, and we're going to do this until we have 6 stitches completed. So there's 2, all right, so now that we have our 6 single crochets completed, we're going to create our second buttonhole. And to do that, we're going to do another chain 7. So start yarn over and pull up a loop. We're going to do this until we have 7 chains. So now we have our 7 chains. We're going to skip 6 and slip stitch into that 7th chain. So again, starting to count from this first chain here, we're going to count over 6. And then I counted that wrong. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we're going to slip stitch into this 7th chain. So insert your hook into that chain, yarn over and pull up a loop, 2 loops on your hook. Then we're going to pull that loop through the loop on your hook to complete your slip stitch. And now we have 3 single crochets left to be worked in this row. Now we're going to work 1 single crochet into each of those remaining stitches. So that's the end of row 21. You should have 14 stitches and these 2 chain 6 spaces, which will act as buttonhole loops to close our little tote bag. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut our yarn and fasten off here. So I'm going to cut my yarn, leaving a tail of 4 to 6 inches to weave in. And then you can either pull your yarn all the way through, or you can yarn over and pull up a loop and then pull the yarn all the way through. Okay, whatever your preference is there, we're going to fasten off and weave in our ends. Right, so just give me a moment. I'll be back in just a second. I'm going to weave this end in so it's not in the way, and I'm going to show you how to create our straps for our tote bag. So now we are ready to attach our straps to our bag. Now, this is where the color kind of coded stitch markers come in handy, because I know that this bright yellow stitch is my stitch 2, and that's where we're going to be starting our strap. So we're going to need to create a slip knot to attach our yarn to our bag. So I'm going to take my tail end of my yarn, wrap it around my fingers, create an X, flip it over, and pin it down. Then I'm going to take my crochet hook and go under the first strand, over the second, and pull that second strand out and under and transfer everything onto my hook. And then I'm going to pull both those yarn tail ends and tighten the slip knot up to my hook. And I'm ready to attach my yarn. So I'm going to be attaching my yarn with a slip stitch to this second stitch here. So I'm going to move my stitch marker out of the way, and I'm going to insert my hook into that stitch. Then I'm going to yarn over and pull up a loop. You should have 2 loops on your hook here, your slip knot and the yarn over, and then you're going to pull that yarn through the loop on your hook to create a slip knot. And now we have joined our yarn and we're ready to continue with our bag strap. So we're going to do a chain of 50 for our bag strap. If you would like to adjust the length of your bag strap, you would either add or omit chains from this point, but the chain 50 was created so the bag can be worn crossbody on the doll. So we're going to yarn over and chain up 1, yarn over and chain up again. We're going to continue to do this yarn over and chain up until we have 50 chains. All right, so if you'd like to pause your video and come back to me when you've got 50 chains, I'll be back in just a moment. So I'm back and I just finished my last chain of my chain of 50, and I'm ready to attach this strap to the other side of my bag. So taking a look at the body of the bag, we're going to attach our yarn to the opposite side of the bag with a slip stitch into stitch 18. And so for me, that is that orange stitch marker here. I'm going to move that out of the way. And just take a moment before you're about to attach your chain. Make sure that you don't twist your chain when you're flipping it over. If you need to, I like to take my finger and place it in the middle of the chain and then fold it over onto itself, so that way I know that there are no twists in my chain. So then I'm going to insert my hook into stitch 18 here, yarn over and pull up a loop. There should be 2 loops on your hook, and then I'm going to pull that loop through the loop on my hook to create a slip stitch. And now I'm going to do a slip stitch into stitch 19, so that's the stitch directly next to where I just attached. I'm going to get rid of that stitch marker here and slip stitch into that next stitch. Now I'm going to turn my work because I want to be working back down the chain to the other side of the strap. At this point, we're going to work 1 slip stitch into each of the chains back to the other side of the bag. So starting into the first chain that we created, we're going to insert our hook, yarn over, pull up a loop. Oops, 1 second. Insert our hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, then pull that loop through the loop on our hook. And then we've already done slip stitches already, so we're just going to continue to work 1 slip stitch into each of these chains back to the other side. So if you'd like to pause your video and work 1 slip stitch into each of the chains that we created for our strap, I'll meet you back once we've got our 50 slip stitches, and I'll show you how we're going to finish off our straps. All right, so I'm back and I've done 1 slip stitch into each of my chains, and I'm back at the other side of my piece. And now that I've done my slip stitches, I'm going to work 1 last slip stitch into that last marked stitch, which is stitch 3 of row 11, to fasten my strap properly. So now that I have my last slip stitch done, I can fasten off. I'm going to leave a tail of at least 4 to 6 inches, cut my yarn, and then I can pull that yarn all the way through here to fasten off. So now that we have fastened off, we can weave in our ends. So you need to weave in your ends here and from attaching your yarn. And then, I mean, you could do this before you weave in your ends, but the next step, once you're done that, would be to secure your buttons to your tote bag. So using your sewing needle and thread, you'd take your buttons and sew them where you would like to fasten the bag. So what I like to do is fold the closure flap down, and then I would mark where I would need to place my buttons here. If you're not sure, you just really want to mark the row that you want to line them up in, I like to just take a stitch marker and place it through one of the stitches in the row where I'd like my buttons to be lined up, and then I can just start sewing them on from there. And then once your buttons are sewn on, your bag is all ready to be used by your Advent Adam and Addie dolls. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please hit that like button and please consider subscribing to this channel. If you enjoy free crochet patterns, please check out my blog, theloopylamb.com, where we've got over 100 free crochet patterns, and many of which include step-by-step tutorials like this one. If you have any questions or comments, I'd love to hear from you. Please leave them in the comment section below. Thanks so much for watching, friends. Happy hooking, and I'll see you next time.